Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Arbitrary 20. In this video we're going to be making a character I'm calling the Witch Doctor. It'll be a support and damage hybrid build that'll have good sustained damage, as well as ways to heal your allies, buff your allies, and debuff your enemies. This is a great build if you think your party could use a support or healer type character, but you still want to be able to pack a punch and deal some damage yourself as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the race. For the race we're going to be going with a Tortle. The race pick doesn't matter a whole lot for this build, but we are going to be taking some druid levels, so I think Tortle's a good pick just so we can have a good AC and not have to worry about those druid armor restrictions. And then for our ability scores, assuming point buy, we'll have a strength of 8, a dexterity of 10, a constitution of 15, plus 1 from our race for a total of 16, an intelligence of 8, a wisdom of 15, plus 2 from our race for a total of 17, and lastly a charisma of 14. And then if you're rolling for ability scores, I would prioritize wisdom first, constitution second, and then make sure you have at least a 13 in charisma for multiclassing. And then for our ideal equipment, we'll actually need all 3 different types of spellcasting foci. We'll need a druidic focus, an arcane focus, and a holy symbol. And then lastly, you'll want to get a shield as well. And then moving on to levels 1 through 5, we're going to be starting off with 5 levels of cleric. For spells, starting off with cantrips, you'll want to pick up Toll the Dead, resistance, and guidance. We'll get guidance again for free at level 7, so after that you can swap this out for a different cantrip using the cantrip versatility feature from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And then as a quick note before we go on to the first level spells, for all of the cleric leveled spells I'm going to be listing more than you'll actually be able to prepare. There's really only going to be one must-have spell. The rest you can pick and choose and prepare whatever you think you'll need that day. So for first level spells, the ones I would recommend are Bless, Bane, Command, and Healing Word. Bless letting you buff 3 of your allies' attacks and saving throws by a d4. This is a fantastic buff spell and probably one of the best uses of your concentration up until level 5, but even after that it's still not bad. And then we have Bane, which is sort of the opposite of Bless. It subtracts a d4 from enemies' attacks and saves, but they do have to fail a charisma save in the first place to be affected by it. Both of these spells are great. Which one to use kind of just depends on the situation you're in and what the other members in your party can do. If all of your other party members are making attack rolls, Bless is probably the way to go, but if the majority of your party is causing the enemies to make saving throws, Bane might be a better choice. And then Command is a great utility spell to have in combat, letting you give an enemy any one-word command if they fail a wisdom saving throw, and they have to do that for their next turn. And then lastly we have Healing Word. It's a staple healing spell for clerics. Usually you'll want to save this for when an ally goes unconscious, and you can just use your bonus action to get them right back up. And then on to second level spells. We'll have Aid, Blindness, Deafness, Locate Object, and Lesser Restoration. Aid is a pretty unique healing spell since it increases current and maximum hit points. Even though it lasts 8 hours, I think its best use is actually in combat. With just a second level spell, you can potentially bring back multiple unconscious allies, and then they have that lasting buff of increasing their maximum HP for the next 8 hours as well. And then we have Blindness, Deafness. This is going to be a bit of a weaker debuff in most cases, but the nice thing is it lasts for a minute and doesn't require concentration, so you can use it along with other spells. And then Locate Object and Lesser Restoration are just great utility spells to have when you need them. And then on to third level spells, we have Aura, Vitality, Dispel Magic, Mass Healing Word, Revivify, and Spirit Guardians. Aura Vitality is a great healing option to use outside of combat. Over a minute you'll do 20d6 of healing, which is an average of about 70 hit points. Dispel Magic has a ton of different use cases and is always nice to have. Mass Healing Word and Revivify are another 2 cleric staples. Mass Healing Word just being Healing Word but being able to affect a lot more creatures, and then Revivify being able to bring back a dead creature if they died within the last minute. And then last but definitely not least, we have Spirit Guardians. This is going to be our main damage spell. I'll be talking more about it later, but you'll definitely always want to have this one prepared. And then for our Divine Domain, I think there's 3 pretty good choices here: Life Domain, Twilight Domain, and Grave Domain. Life Domain is the one you want to go with if you want to boost your out of combat healing. The Disciple of Life feature will combo very well with things like Aura of Vitality and Goodberry once we get it from Druid. With this domain, your party should be able to go into most combats at full health, as you'll pretty easily be able to heal them between combats. Also, don't forget that since good berries last 24 hours, you can create them the night before if you have any extra spell slots left. I would go with Twilight Domain if you want to focus more on in-combat healing. Twilight Sanctuary is one of, if not the most powerful channel divinity in the game. As long as your allies end their turns within 30 feet of you, they'll get a d6 plus your cleric level and temporary hit points every round. To put this in perspective, if you're level 5, you have a 4-person faction party and you go through 4 rounds of combat, you'll end up giving out 136 temporary hit points throughout that combat. And then lastly, I would go with Grave Domain if you want to help your allies do some more damage. Path to the Grave is a great channel divinity option that makes an enemy vulnerable to an attack's damage. If you combo this with an ally that can do one really big attack, something like a paladin or a rogue, this can be incredibly strong. Also, the Grave Domain's 6th level feature, Sentinel at Death's Door, will help you prevent some incoming damage by canceling enemies' crits. And then for the ability score increase or feat we'll get at 4th level, I would go with Telekinetic and take the +1 to Wisdom. This will combo great with Spirit Guardians, allowing us to deal the damage to an enemy twice in one round. The first time by pulling them in with this on our turn, and then they'll still take the damage again at the start of their turn. And then on to levels 6 and 7, we're going to be taking 2 levels of Druid. For our spells, starting off with cantrips, the first one we'll go with is Thorn Whip. This combos with Spirit Guardians pretty much the same way the Telekinetic feat does, and it's one of our main reasons for taking these 2 levels of Druid. And then for the second Druid cantrip, you can just pick up any utility cantrip you'd like, something like Druidcraft, Mending, or Mold Earth. And then for first level spells, I would go with Absorb Elements, Goodberry, Entangle, Fairy Fire, Detect Magic, and Longstrider. We get a lot of first level spells here from Druid, which is really nice for utility. Absorb Elements is a really great defensive reaction spell. Whenever we would take elemental damage, we can become resistant to it for that round. Goodberry we already talked about earlier with the Life Domain, but even if you're not Life Domain, I would still use that same strategy. 10 hit points isn't quite as good as the 40 you're going to get with Life Domain, but it is still a decent amount of healing either way. And then Entangle or Fairy Fire are pretty good concentration options at first level if you want to mix it up from Bless or Bane. Entangle letting you restrain a group of enemies, and Fairy Fire letting you give your allies advantage on attacks against enemies and revealing invisible enemies. And then Detect Magic and Longstrider are just good utility spells to have. And then we'll get Wild Shape. This is mainly just utility on this build. You can use it for things like scouting or traveling faster. I probably wouldn't be using this in combat on this build. And then for our Druid Circle, we're going to be going with Circle of Stars. First we'll get our star map. We'll get guidance for free here, so like I said, we can swap out our guidance from Cleric next time we get a feat from Cleric. We also get Guiding Bolt as a free preparation, and we can cast it for free a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. This is a great option if enemies are too far away for our Spirit Guardians and Thorn Whip combo. It'll do a bit more damage than something like Toll the Dead at this level, and it'll give one of your allies advantage on their next attack against the same creature. And then next, from Circle of Stars, we'll get Starry Form. We can use a bonus action and consume a use of our Wild Shape to pick one of 3 options, and it'll last for 10 minutes. Archer and Chalice will be the go-to options in combat. Archer giving you a bonus action ranged attack, and then Chalice giving you some additional healing whenever you use a healing spell. Dragon will mostly be good for utility, but it could be a decent option in combat if you think easier concentration checks is going to be more valuable than what you get from Archer or Chalice. And now moving on to level 8, we're going to be taking 1 level of Warlock here. For our otherworldly patron, we're going to be going with Undead, and the main thing we'll get here is Form of Dread. Whenever we hit an enemy with an attack, they have to make a wisdom save or they become frightened of us. This gives them disadvantage on all of their attacks, which is great for our whole party, but it also makes it so they can't move towards us. This is very helpful since we're going to be pulling enemies closer to us with Thorn Whip and Telekinetic. Usually this would be putting ourselves in danger if we were pulling in melee enemies, but now if we're able to make them frightened when we pull them to the edge of our Spirit Guardians, we'll still be able to deal that damage twice to them, but since they're frightened, they won't be able to come up to us and do any melee attacks. This may seem like a relatively small detail, but it could prevent a lot of damage in the right encounter. And then for our spells from Warlock, starting with cantrips, first we'll pick up Blade Ward. This gives us resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for a round. This is kind of just an alternative to the dodge action. In certain scenarios it might be a little bit better. And then for the second cantrip, you can just do any utility cantrip. I like Minor Illusion or Prestidigitation here. And then for the 2 first level spells, we'll pick up Armor of Agathis and Unseen Servant. Armor of Agathis can be used to boost our defenses and our damage a little bit if we do find ourselves getting hit in melee, and then Unseen Servant is just a nice utility option. And then lastly, on to levels 9 through 20, we're just going to be taking the rest of our levels in Cleric, going all the way up to Cleric 17. And as a quick note here, we're just going to be going over spells and feats, as I already discussed the subclasses earlier, and although Divine Intervention is awesome and will be very strong when it works, it's not really something we can build around. So for spells, starting with 4th level, we'll be picking up Aura of Life, Aura of Purity, Banishment, Death Ward, and Divination. Aura of Life and Aura of Purity are fairly situational, but in the right situation they will be very powerful. Banishment being a great single target control option. You can basically just remove an enemy from the battlefield for a short time, or if you're sending them to their home plane, permanently. Death Ward being a great defensive option, you can put this on yourself or any of your party members, and whenever you go to 0, you'll come back to 1 hit point. And then Divination is a nice utility option to have if you think your deity might know something that's helpful to you. And then on to 5th level spells, we'll get Commune, Greater Restoration, and Scrying. Commune being pretty similar to Divination, but you get to ask more questions and they're going to be answered a little bit differently. And then Greater Restoration can remove just about any debuff from you or one of your allies, and then Scrying pretty much just lets you spy on someone if they fail a Wisdom saving throw. And then on to 6th level spells, we'll pick up Heal, Hero's Feast, and Word of Recall. Heal will let us instantly restore 70 hit points to us or one of our allies. Hero's Feast is a really strong buff you'll probably want to use the day of a boss fight, especially against creatures that make you make Wisdom saving throws. And then Word of Recall is a pretty good get out of jail free card. When you cast it the first time, you designate a sanctuary, and then when you cast it again, you can take you and your allies back to that sanctuary. And then for 7th level spells, we'll get Conjure Celestial, Divine Word, and Regenerate. Conjure Celestial is a great summon spell. You'll usually want to summon a Coatl. That's most often the most powerful option. I would use this when you think your Spirit Guardian's Thorn Whip combo isn't going to be very good in that combat. Divine Word has some various effects depending on the creature's current hit points, but the main reason to use this is that last line. Regardless of its current hit points, a celestial, elemental, fey, or fiend that fails its save is forced back to its plane of origin and can't return for 24 hours. And then Regenerate is, I think, a fairly underrated high-level healing option. Does a pretty good heal when you cast it, but for the next hour, that creature regains 1 hit point at the start of each of their turns. That doesn't seem like much, but it is 10 hit points per minute, and in a combat, if they go unconscious at the start of their turn, they'll immediately just come back up, and they'll still get their turn since it happened at the start of their turn. So concentration free, it automatically brings the creature back every round, and it'll heal them pretty much back to full in between each combat. I would probably only use this if you're expecting multiple combats in the same hour, but if that's the case, this is a very strong option. And then on to 8th level spells, we'll want to pick up Anti-Magic Field and Holy Aura. Anti-Magic Field just suppresses all magic within 10 feet of you, including your own. This can be very good against other magic users though, especially if you can set it up where you're next to them on their turn, but you're able to move away from them so your allies can still attack them on their turn. And then Holy Aura is a very strong buff that you can do on all allies within 30 feet of you. It'll give them advantage on all saving throws, and all attacks against them will have disadvantage. And then lastly, at 9th level, we'll pick up Mass Heal. This lets you distribute 700 hit points between any number of creatures within 60 feet of you. This will probably get all of your party members and potentially even all of your companions back up to full. This is definitely a great use of your 9th level spell slot. And lastly here, we'll go over the 3 ability score increases or feats we get during this time in Cleric. For the 8th level ability score increase or feat, I would go with Warcaster. This will improve our concentration checks, fix any issues we may have with components, and it'll let us replace our opportunity attacks with spell casts against that creature. And then at 12th level, we'll just take a +2 to Wisdom to bring that to a 20. And then at 16th level, there's not really anything left we need for the build, so I would just go with a strong generic feat, something like Alert or Lucky. And that's all I have for the build. If you guys would like to check out my last build, I called it the Tank on the Edge of Death. It's mainly a Way of the Long Death monk that's able to continuously come back to 1 hit point when they would go unconscious. If that sounds interesting, you can check it out right here. Either way, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one.